Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé, The Single Life. Let's watch.
Michael, he does care for me. I'm appreciated and he missed me.
Please, don't give your answer now, okay? I hurt you a lot. You have your rights to think, okay? But whatever you decide, don't answer now, okay? Take your time.
I mean, it's a little, I mean, I care about them and I hope the best for them, but it's a little comical that when he just said no, and you're like, no, just, take your time. It's like, well, I think he kind of just told you the answer. I don't know, but, are they going to get back together? Maybe I'll know, because I actually banked a lot of episodes. I haven't watched a lot of the Single Life. I think the season's over. It has been over for a while, and I've been watching all this other stuff and doing all this other stuff, so I'm going back in time maybe a couple months, so maybe I'll know what happened.
It's kind of a shocker. I never thought Natalie would want to get back together.
You cold? You want to go inside?
Okay.
We actually had our best conversation ever.
Yeah, it's telling. I didn't know that he would see it that way. It certainly looked that way on camera, but we don't know what kind of conversations they're having off camera. It does make me wonder about how this show plays a role in their relationship in multiple ways. But one of the ways is that it's possible that, well, I'll tell you from my own life. I have a podcast in which it's an audio podcast with, if y'all listen to those episodes, you know that me and my best friends are on the podcast, Bob, Rebecca, Umberto, and the podcast forces us as best friends to sit across from each other. I sit here and, my best friend sits right over there. And especially with Umberto for 14 plus years, we've just been staring at each other for hours talking about all sorts of things, whether it be something in the news or something about trauma, something about Umberto's life, I'm listening, or we'll talk about our relationship in a in-depth way. And of course, me and Umberto have a relationship outside of the podcast, but they enhance each other. The off-podcast relationship is a lot of fun stuff. We play video games together, we go out together, we go to parties together, we go to movies together, socialize together, go to dinner. And then the podcast activity is very intense. There's a lot of talking. I record episodes with Umberto, usually 2 at a time. So, and some of our episodes are really long. So we might just be staring at each other for 5 hours every 2 weeks, just talking and talking and talking and listening and talking and listening and sharing and laughing and crying. My dogs are barking. And we've often talked about how the podcast has deepened our relationship, has forced us, because how often does that happen where you're forced to, without any distractions, you turn off your phone and I close the office door and there's no distractions, there's no kids, there's no pets, there's no work, there's no internet, there's no computers, we're just talking to each other. When does that happen in our life? Like you go to dinner with your friends and you talk, but you're eating, there's distractions, it's usually not for 5 hours straight, just staring at each other. And even that, although can be fairly intimate, might kind of be rare. There might be just texting or, I don't know, going for a walk. Well, a walk can be pretty intimate if you talk in depth. But anyway, point is that sometimes I wonder in a similar fashion on the show, because I don't know this as a fact, obviously, but I'm under the impression that the producers will, like with Mike and Natalie, they wanted, either they suggested or worked with Mike and Natalie to say, okay, what kind of scene do we want to have? Because, they're spending a lot of money on the production. There's sound people and microphones and cameras and concerns about the lighting and, producers and drivers and people that have food. There's probably a whole crew of people that are there. And so they have to coordinate. They can't just have reality happen and just happen to catch it, right? Occasionally that'll happen, but usually there's a fair amount of equipment they set up, and so they probably worked with them and came up with this idea of, okay, how about you sit outside by the pond and you have a conversation, and you can imagine that the two of them, they're sitting there, they know they're being filmed, they know the world is going to see it, they're probably on their better behavior than they would be, maybe a little bit more vulnerable because they know that that's what the show wants. I think they get paid based on how interesting they are. You know, I don't think I think they know if they're not interesting, they're not likely to come back on the show. Also, you're thinking about your friends and family watching this, so you want to be differentiated and fair and nice or whatever. And I'm also under the impression that even though we saw maybe a 10 or 15 minute conversation, that the conversation is much longer than that. So it's a very concentrated, no distractions. You know, they probably have to turn off their phones, and everyone else turns off their phones, and there's no distraction. And you just stare at each other. And the show will often have a lot of scenes like that. Sometimes it blows up and there's a problem, but you could also imagine it enhancing or changing the relationship somehow, you know, because a lot of people avoid that. A lot of people avoid in-depth one-on-one conversations without any distraction. I mean, just think about the last time, and I don't know what the average life or the average relationship is like, but use this as an opportunity right now while I'm yammering about this to think about for yourself. When was the last time you just sat without, and I'm saying truly without any distractions? No children, no pets. No children, no pets, no phone, no TV, no food, no one else. When was the last time you just talked without any distractions to your partner? Now, some of you might achieve this in bed, for example, sex, or just as you're waking up in the morning or going to bed at night. That can be a great opportunity for that sort of thing, because usually you do turn off your phone, hopefully. The children are in bed or the pets are away or something, hopefully. Or at least the pets are asleep, not really bothering you. So, because it's so frequent that we will triangulate, right? That when we're having an in-depth conversation with someone, we will periodically turn to the children or the pets or whatever and release tension through those other means. You know, like a very common thing that happens even in my own marriage is that instead of being intimate with each other, sometimes we'll be together physically, but we'll be intimate with the dogs. You know, like we'll be cuddling with the dogs. When one could argue, and I've had this thought many times, that when we're together, you know, we all have need for physical affection, or the vast majority of us, seemingly anyway. And there's vulnerability though when we bid for that. But animals are kind of, especially some animals, are very prone to cuddling back with us. Also, they're kind of captive prisoners in some respect. You know, they don't necessarily have a choice in the matter sometimes, and so you'll just pick your cat up or pick your dog up whether they want it or not, and you'll just sort of force them to cuddle with you in the moment. You know, and so it just kind of raises the question as whether or not that's ethical. But I do it all the time. I figure, yeah, they probably want it. You know, usually they do. Anyway, so. We will triangulate like that because it's less vulnerable, it's less scary to us. So, you know, just think about it for yourself. The last time you even just for half an hour, 30 minutes, it's not that long, right? Once a week, you just sit down, no distractions, no children, no pets, no phones, no television, no restaurant, no other humans, no computers, no, you know, just other things that are always no music, nothing that's interfering with things, and just talked and asked questions. You know, because that's the other thing about, I think, being on the show and also podcasting is that you're aware of the fact that people are watching, and you know you have to, in the radio world, they'll say, keep the needle moving. You know, you got to keep the conversation at least somewhat interesting. You can't just randomly trail off. You've got to make content. And so I think that encourages, like when I'm podcasting with my best friends, it encourages us to be active and to be better listeners and to share more. And I think that it deepens a relationship. It really, really does. And so I wonder if they would have ever had this conversation, Mike and Natalie, if they hadn't been on reality TV and the producers hadn't engineered it. And did they benefit from that? The flip side, did they disbenefit from being kind of encouraged or forced to conflict about things? Like I was hypothesizing or speculating that with, you know, earlier in the season when Josh and Natalie had their big fight, that Natalie was decompensating and she was fetal positioning in the bed that morning when Josh was going to fly off. And Josh went into the other room in the hotel and was like, I don't know what to do. And then we see Natalie stand up and go, she just kind of rolls her eyes as she kind of saunters defiantly into the room with Josh and then sits down and talks to him. And my suspicion is that they were badgering her or suggesting something, intimating something to get her to go talk to Josh, because it didn't. They figured it would play better for television if she actually went. And so sometimes the format of the show or the social pressure on the show could cause a small problem to get much worse. And it's just interesting to think about, right? Because we think of it as reality TV, and none of us think about it as reality, but it's something close to reality. I don't think any of us believe that Mike and Natalie weren't in a relationship, right? So, there's a reality element there. There's a real, high stakes element there. And then you think because presumably at some point they get approached or they reach out to be on a reality show, and they might not have ever been on a reality show. Let's say they never get picked or whatever. How would their life be different? It's interesting to think about, right? Would it be better? Would it be worse? Hard to know, but it's interesting to think about. And of course, their online life would be different because they're famous now, and their Instagrams are probably a lot, at least Natalie's, because I think she's more active. But putting that aside, what would their relationship be like? Would it be better? Would it be worse? Would it have, if I was to take a guess with this couple, I would say that they would have lasted a little longer, but still would have had the same problem. Because I suspect that the mom was potentially inserted in a way that the show either influenced or even just engineered. And that was a pretty aggravating element, So, but I could also see the relationship exploding much earlier because the cameras might have helped them to feel supported in some way, or again, on their best behavior, that kind of stuff. And it's just an interesting question to think about that. When they sign up for, when you sign up for reality TV, you're probably thinking, well, yeah, go ahead and film my life. You probably don't think, I am now entering onto a different path in my romantic life. Now that I'm going to go on this reality TV, of course, Love is Blind would be, you would know that you're handing your life over, your story over, because you're going to be hooked up, you're going to be matched up with someone that you wouldn't be normally in all likelihood. But for these folks, I'm guessing that they don't think about that because it's not something I don't think is very commonly understood, or even, I don't even know if it's true. I'm just throwing it out.
Natalie really opened up to me and apologized, and I think that was long overdue.
Good to see you again.
Thank you. Most important, we talk, okay?
Yeah. Just a lot of things go through my head. I still love Natalie, but I don't know. Is she thinking about us, or is she just thinking about herself?
So Trish, the mom, is living with Mike, which I'm guessing is going to throw a major wrench in all of this. But I could also see Mike standing up for Natalie against Trish. If I was to take a guess, I would say that Mike has already said yes in his heart to Natalie, but in his mind, he's just saying, well, I don't want to think about it, or I'm just going to wait a little longer before I say yes to Natalie. That's just, I don't know if I'm just distorting or something, but I suspect that in his heart, he's just like, yes, she came back and she apologized and she said she loves me and she wants to be with me. This is what I've been waiting for. I think we've all been there before, right? When we tell all our friends we're done, and then the person just says, hey, let's get back. And you're like, okay. I don't know if I'm just distorting, but I imagine that Mike is feeling that way because, I think he still wants to be with her. And especially when they have a nice conversation like that, it could give you a lot of hope that there won't be the conflict that existed before. But that's not likely unless they go to that therapist.
Hi.
Hi.
And all of a sudden, Trish walks in.
I have a present for you.
Oh boy. What a bitch.
Yikes. What? Yikes. Wow. That hooker accusation is seeming a lot more like, I mean, we've seen in that direction, but wow. What? What is going on? And then you see Mike. I feel bad for everyone. Mike is, because Mike's pushed back on the mom before. And you just hear they just had this lovely talk, and Mike's just, oh boy, wow. Because you got to figure that's the tip of the iceberg, not only just with Natalie, but everything that, I don't know. Who knows? I don't know.
Beautiful moment. And all of a sudden, Trish walks in.
I have a present for you.
Oh boy.
What a bitch. Trish look at me like as a person who could.
It'd be one thing if the mom said that, you know, F and B. It'd be one thing if Mike has ever, and maybe behind the scenes he does, but I don't think he does. It'd be one thing if Mike agreed with her. You know, I think there are some things that Mike would agree with, like, yeah, she treated me badly or something. So, okay, so maybe I am not taking that into consideration, that post-breakup, Mike, behind the scenes, would, which would be normal, would get pretty hostile in his verbatim language around Natalie's. You know, he might even say that off camera, you know, Natalie, what an effing B or whatever. You could imagine someone saying that. We could imagine that Mike saying that. But the fact that the mom says it in front of the camera, I don't know. It's notable.
What a bitch. Trish look at me like as a person who could take her son from.
And yeah, just to reiterate that whole hooker thing, just completely different light now that I see this. I mean, it is 1,000,000,000% more likely that she did call her a hooker. Because I remember at the time being like, oh, come on, Natalie. Like, what's the chance that she just ran? But, I mean, did y'all think that the mom would have said that back then? Or am I retconning this? Yeah. Wow. And then you think, okay, if the mom is like that, what has Mike been through in his life? What about the dad? Do we even know anything about the dad? What's going on? And for Mike?
Well, thank you, Natalie. How are you?
I'm fine.
Good.
I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just disappointed in how this all turned out. I'm just going to tell you right out, you know. I don't like the way things came with you and Michael. And my question to you would be, why would you even do this to Michael?
All right, so let's see how this goes. If this was a legitimate question, I wouldn't be too worried, but I don't think this conversation is going to go well given Trish's angle here. I think she's made up her mind. But verbatim, it's not a bad question. It's just like, but you'd think Trish would at least have some ability to understand, like, they fought a lot. I mean, Trish was able to watch the TV show, so the fights that she didn't see personally, she could watch on the show. Presumably she's watched it, I don't know, and would see that they both just fought a lot, and it wasn't a strange action for Natalie to leave. I think a lot of people would have left that relationship, you know, whether they thought it was their fault or whatever. You know, there was a lot of conflict. There wasn't much happiness there. So what is Trish asking right now?
Why did you do this?
Now, I think, and Trish may have even said something along these lines, I think Trish believes that Natalie's a scammer and a psychopath. I think she literally believes that about Natalie. So I think this is a rhetorical question that Trish is asking.
The broken heart from her son. My mom is a tough woman. She does often speak her mind. My mom's got questions, and it's just a matter of whether we're going to get answers or not.
I'm sorry if you didn't forgive me. I'm sorry.
I just don't know why you would pretend to love somebody so.
Right. They were rhetorical questions. If I were a little birdie on Natalie's shoulder, I would say, don't listen to her. She's accusing you of things that are not necessarily true. There's no reasoning with her. So say something if you want to, but don't try to work things out, because there's no way to win. Or literally just walk out of the door and say, like, well, I don't know what to tell you, Trish. I'm really sorry. Me and Mike had a great conversation earlier, and you know, I think I'm good for now. There's no reason why Natalie has to subject herself to this rhetorical beatdown.
So much that you come over here, you totally used Michael. That's all you did was use him to get to America. And then still, out of the kindness of his heart, because he is such a kind guy, he still sends $1,000 to your mom and helps.
Yeah. I don't think Mike believes this. Now, maybe he does. So there's a possibility that Trish feels like she has license because she thinks or knows that Mike actually, at least part of him, believes this to be true, which is possible. Or Trish convinced Mike or something. I don't know. We've seen a lot of this behavior on the show before where the family members will be convinced that the foreigner is a scammer. Now, some of the people do seem to exhibit that. I mean, one or two, Muhammad and Eve come to mind. Also, Muhammad and, what was her name? The other one. That was really quite famous. I can't believe I can't remember her name. Anyway, it's rare that at least seemingly there's like, I don't know, Usman maybe. I don't know. It's hard to tell. But I don't think Natalie was at all scamming. We can't discount the system that these individuals are embedded in. It's a good chance that Trish and Becky, Elizabeth's sister, Jen, Charlie in particular, all day long, their radio shows, their TV shows, their friend group, work, the newspapers they read are just bombarding them with propaganda regarding foreigners and scamming people and just lies, just complete misinformation, trying to indoctrinate and brainwash people because they're trying to sell their show. They want to make you afraid so they can sell advertisements. And the way that they make you afraid is by tapping into known paranoias and exaggerating them, racism, xenophobia being two of those paranoias that we have in our society. They just exaggerate it. They keep it on the table all day long, all year long, so that you keep clicking on Twitter and you keep watching those stupid shows and you keep reading those idiotic things online. And so it's a feedback loop and it just keeps going and going. And so we can't discount that. There's a chance that Trish, without that, would not be doing this. There's a chance that Charlie, without that, wouldn't be doing what he's doing. Although, I don't know, that one seems more systemic to the family. Anyway, I'm yammering. All right, well, that is it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.